January 2022. A nation of 25 million people suddenly goes dark. Government websites vanish. News agencies disappear. Email servers stop responding. For hours at a time, over multiple days, North Korea's internet simply ceases to exist. The world watches, confused. Theories spread like wildfire. Is it the US government? Anonymous? A coordinated state-sponsored attack? The truth is far stranger. One man, one computer, one very personal grudge. This is the story of how a single American hacker brought an entire country to its knees. The hacker who shut down North Korea. To understand what happened, you first need to understand something about North Korea that most people don't know. Their internet barely exists. While you and I share a global network of billions of connected devices, North Korea operates something entirely different. The entire country has roughly 1,000 public internet addresses. 1,000. For comparison, a single American university might have more than that. Everything flows through a single state-controlled internet service provider called StarJV, a joint venture between the North Korean government and a Russian telecommunications company. Every website, every email, every government portal, all of it passes through this tiny, heavily monitored digital bottleneck. For most North Koreans, there is no internet at all. What they have instead is called Kwangmyong, a closed domestic intranet that connects to absolutely nothing outside the country. A walled garden of propaganda and state-approved information. Only the elite, the trusted, the powerful few have access to the real internet. And even then, it's watched, monitored, controlled. This isolation makes North Korea's internet infrastructure both a fortress and a glass house. Difficult to penetrate from the inside, but remarkably fragile from the outside. And in late 2021, someone on the inside made a critical mistake. They picked the wrong target. His name is P4X. Well, that's not his real name, but it's the only one that matters for this story. He's an American cybersecurity researcher, someone who makes a living finding vulnerabilities in systems before the bad guys do. In late 2021, P4X noticed something strange. Someone was trying to hack him, not with some crude phishing email or obvious malware. This was sophisticated, professional. A zero-day exploit, a security flaw so new and unknown that no patch existed yet, targeting Western Digital. P4X recognized the signature. He'd seen intelligence reports about this group before. They were called the Lazarus Group, sometimes known as Kimsuki, North Korean state-sponsored hackers with a long history of high-profile attacks. These were the same people who'd hacked Sony Pictures in 2014, the same group behind the WannaCry ransomware that crippled hospitals worldwide in 2017, the same operatives who'd stolen hundreds of millions from cryptocurrency exchanges. And now, they were coming for him personally. P4X quickly patched his systems. The attack failed. He was safe. But he wasn't satisfied. P4X did what he was supposed to do. He reported the attack to the FBI. He documented everything. He waited for the US government to respond. Nothing happened. Weeks passed, then months. The official channels moved at the speed of bureaucracy, which is to say barely at all. Meanwhile, intelligence suggested the North Koreans were still out there, targeting other researchers, probing for weaknesses, stealing intellectual property. The more P4X thought about it, the angrier he became. These weren't abstract nation-state actors anymore. They'd made it personal. They'd come into his digital home uninvited, and the authorities weren't going to do anything about it. So P4X made a decision. If the government wouldn't respond, he would. Not through official channels, not through coordinated international efforts or diplomatic pressure. He would do it himself, alone. P4X began his research the way any good hacker does, by mapping the terrain. North Korea's internet infrastructure, it turned out, was almost comically vulnerable. That tiny number of IP addresses, roughly 1,024, meant there wasn't much to hide behind. No complex networks, no redundant systems, no sophisticated defense-in-depth security architecture. Everything was visible. Everything was reachable. P4X started scanning. He identified every server, every router, every publicly accessible system connected to North Korean IP space. Government websites, news portals, the national airlines booking system, email servers, domain name servers that translated web addresses into numerical locations. He found a digital infrastructure held together with digital duct tape, outdated software, unpatched systems, security through obscurity rather than actual security measures. The North Koreans had assumed their isolation would protect them. They were wrong. P4X spent weeks studying their network topology, understanding how data flowed, where the choke points were, which systems were critical. He wasn't just looking for vulnerabilities, he was building a complete picture of how to break an entire country's connection to the outside world. And then he started building his weapon. What P4X created wasn't particularly sophisticated. It didn't need to be. He built a custom tool that would continuously scan and attack every single North Korean server and router he could reach. It would exploit known vulnerabilities, overwhelm systems with traffic, force reboots, crash services, and generally make everything unusable. The technical term is a distributed denial of service attack, or DDoS. Flood a target with so much traffic that legitimate users can't get through. It's one of the oldest tricks in the hacker playbook, but scale matters, and persistence matters, and understanding your target matters. P4X configured his tools to run automatically, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. He deployed them across his own machines and some cloud servers. He set them to rotate through different attack vectors, different targets, different techniques. He wasn't trying to steal data. He wasn't trying to break into classified systems. He was trying to do something simpler and more devastating. Make North Korea's connection to the outside world completely unreliable. And in late January 2022, he pressed the button. The first outage lasted about 6 hours. On the evening of January 14, 2022, internet monitoring companies around the world noticed something unusual. Traffic to and from North Korean IP addresses simply stopped, completely, as if someone had unplugged the entire country from the global network. Cloudflare, one of the world's largest internet infrastructure companies, confirmed the outage. So did Kentic, a network intelligence firm. Researchers in South Korea, just miles from the border, tried to reach North Korean websites. Nothing. North Korea's official news agency, KCNA, went dark. The Air Koryo airline booking site disappeared. Government portals returned nothing but timeout errors. Even their official Flickr account, yes, North Korea has a Flickr account, became unreachable. For 6 hours, North Korea's tiny window to the outside world was completely closed. And then, just as mysteriously, it came back. But P4X wasn't done. Not even close. Over the next several days, the pattern repeated. The internet would go down, it would come back up, it would go down again. Sometimes for hours, sometimes for just minutes at a time. Wave after wave of disruption. Security researchers and internet monitoring firms watched in fascination. This wasn't a typical DDoS attack. This was sustained, relentless, and clearly targeted at North Korea's entire internet infrastructure. The attacks hit everything simultaneously: routers, DNS servers, web hosting. It was comprehensive and merciless. Inside North Korea, the effects rippled through the connected elite. Government officials couldn't access foreign news sites. Diplomats lost email connectivity. Whatever limited e-commerce existed ground to a halt. The few North Koreans with internet access found themselves suddenly cut off from the world, and nobody knew who was behind it. In the information vacuum, theories flourished. Some cybersecurity experts speculated it was the United States government, retaliating for North Korean cyber attacks or nuclear provocations. The timing seemed almost too convenient, coming amid ongoing tensions over North Korea's missile program. Others suggested Anonymous, the loose collective of activist hackers. They had a history of targeting authoritarian regimes. Maybe this was their latest campaign. A few considered the possibility of internal sabotage, perhaps a disgruntled IT worker inside North Korea itself, fed up with the regime. Chinese network issues were considered. Maybe this was just collateral damage from problems with China's infrastructure, which North Korea relies on for much of its internet connectivity. But each theory had problems. the US government would likely never acknowledge such an attack. Anonymous typically claimed credit immediately. Internal sabotage seemed unlikely, given the regime's tight control, and the pattern was too specific, too focused to be accidental spillover. The truth was simpler and more audacious than anyone imagined. It was one guy, in his home office, running some custom scripts and nursing a very personal grudge. In early February 2022, journalist Lily Hay Newman of Wired magazine received an unexpected message. Someone wanted to talk about the North Korea outages. Someone who claimed responsibility. P4X agreed to an interview, speaking on condition of anonymity. And he laid out the entire operation in remarkable detail. Yes, it was him. Yes, he did it alone. Yes, he was still doing it. He explained his motivation simply. The North Koreans had attacked him personally, and nobody was going to hold them accountable. So he decided to become the consequences they'd avoided for too long. He described his tools, his methods, his targets. He talked about the satisfaction of watching an entire country's internet infrastructure buckle under pressure. He expressed no regrets, only frustration that he couldn't do more. The cybersecurity community reacted with a mixture of awe and concern. What P4X had accomplished was, in purely technical terms, impressive. He'd proven that nation-state internet infrastructure could be vulnerable to a single determined individual. But it also raised uncomfortable questions about vigilante justice, about proportionality, about what happens when private citizens wage their own cyberwar. P4X never faced legal consequences. Attacking a foreign country's computer systems is, technically, illegal under US law. The Computer Fraud and Abuse Act doesn't distinguish between servers in Seattle and servers in Pyongyang, but prosecuting someone for attacking North Korea creates complications. It would require the government to acknowledge the attacks happened, to potentially validate North Korea's complaints, to set precedents about what Americans can and cannot do to adversarial nations, and perhaps most importantly, to admit that a single individual accomplished what nation-state actors couldn't, shutting down North Korea's internet at will. So nothing happened. The FBI didn't knock on P4X's door. The Justice Department didn't file charges. The government's response was simple and effective: silence. North Korea, for its part, never publicly acknowledged the outages. To do so would be to admit vulnerability, to show weakness, to reveal just how fragile their connection to the world really was. The outages gradually decreased in frequency and intensity. Either P4X got bored, or North Korea improved its defenses, or perhaps both. But for those few weeks in early 2022, one man held an entire country's internet hostage. And he got away with it. P4X's one-man war against North Korea revealed several uncomfortable truths about our connected world. First, infrastructure matters. North Korea's decision to maintain such a tiny, isolated internet presence made them efficient to control internally, but catastrophically vulnerable externally. When you only have 1,000 doors to the outside world, it doesn't take many people to guard them all, but it also doesn't take many people to break them down. Second, attribution is hard. For weeks, the most sophisticated intelligence agencies and cybersecurity firms in the world couldn't definitively identify who was attacking North Korea. They had theories, suspicions, educated guesses, but no certainty. One person with moderate resources and strong motivation could create chaos that looked like a nation-state operation. Third, the rules of cyber conflict are still being written. What P4X did exists in a legal and ethical grey zone. He didn't steal data or cause permanent damage. He didn't target civilians directly or critical infrastructure like hospitals or power grids. He simply made it difficult for one of the world's most aggressive cyber threat actors to connect to the internet. Is that vigilante justice or appropriate self-defense? Is it cyber warfare or just a particularly aggressive form of protest? The answer depends on who you ask. P4X's story is unique, but it's also a warning. We live in an era where individuals have unprecedented power. A talented programmer with an internet connection and a few $100s of cloud computing credits can, under the right circumstances, rival the capabilities of government agencies. They can find vulnerabilities, build tools, and launch attacks that would have required nation-state resources just a generation ago. That democratization of capability cuts both ways. It means citizens can hold governments accountable. But it also means anyone with sufficient skill and motivation can wage their own private wars with unpredictable consequences. North Korea's internet eventually stabilized. P4X moved on to other projects. The world kept turning. But somewhere in Pyongyang, in the offices of the Lazarus Group, someone learned an important lesson. When you target individual hackers, sometimes they target you back. And unlike governments with rules of engagement and diplomatic consequences to consider, individuals can be remarkably unpredictable. P4X proved that in the digital age, you don't need an army to fight a country. You don't need missiles or tanks or billions of dollars in defense spending. Sometimes all you need is a laptop, an internet connection, and the absolute certainty that you've been wronged. One man, one country, one very personal war. The internet never forgets, and sometimes it fights back.